I first started playing Commander in an environment full of very powerful and expensive decks. Mana Crypts and Demonic Tutors were thrown around like nothing. And as a beginner Commander player, as somebody who has just spent $50 on his own deck that is frankly terrible, that felt rough. That felt kind of like shit. I mean, part of that was just a power level mismatch issue, but it also just felt so overwhelming. How am I ever going to justify spending $200 on a Mana Crypt? Well friends, the obvious answer there is to of course just proxy it. This right here is a Mana Crypt, except it's a Mana Crypt proxy. Now I want to make clear that I am 100% in favor of proxies. Proxies are something that I see not just as a good part of Magic the Gathering, but as an essential part of Magic the Gathering. It is an essential part of how I experience deck building. My first step is of course to build a deck, but my second step is always to proxy all the cards that I don't already own, put them into the deck and see how it plays. That way I can make sure I don't accidentally buy cards that I don't like, which, that has certainly happened in the past and is something that I try to avoid. Now, something that I see very frequently in the comments of my videos is that when the cost of cards comes up, somebody will inevitably leave a YouTube comment saying, just proxy everything. It doesn't matter how expensive the cards are, you can just proxy them. And I think that's sort of valid. However, I also want to make clear that I believe that Magic cards are cool. I like Magic the Gathering cards. And when I say that, I don't just mean the card text. I don't just mean the rules of the game. I do mean the actual physical object of a Magic the Gathering card is really, really cool. Like they're just fun to touch. Like they feel nice. They've got a really good size and kind of rigidity to them. And the art is really nice. And the print quality is usually really nice. I think Magic cards are just neat. On top of that, it's really easy to kind of get emotionally attached to Magic cards because they're just a physical object that are really easy to share. For example, this right here is a Badger Mold Cup. This is of course a very expensive card. It's a card that I wouldn't usually afford myself just because it is too expensive. But I got this one from a friend of mine because we went to the Command Fest in Mainz and I drove everybody down there and I have a car, okay? I drive people everywhere. I do that all the time. And I don't expect anything in return. But as we were down there, he had a Badger Mold Cup. I asked him if he wants to trade it. He was like, yes, I know that you want it for your 6 deck and let's make this happen. Let me make sure you can get your Badger Mold Cup just kind of as a thank you for the fact that you're always driving us around and like being kind of very accommodating in that way. The point is that I thought that was a really nice gesture, a really kind of endearing moment to me. And the fact that it is a real card really plays into that. If this wasn't a real Badger Mold Cup, that gesture wouldn't have really meant all that much. Now, it doesn't just have to be expensive cards that you can get emotionally attached to. This is a forest that my wife drew on. I think it's very funny. This right here is a forest that my sister glued a little actual piece of forest to, which I think is really cool. This right here is a forest that a friend of mine drew for my birthday. This right here is a lion's eye diamond that a friend of mine drew for my birthday. This is a different forest a friend of mine drew for my birthday. This is a Gaia's cradle that a friend of mine drew just because I really wanted one and he offered to make one and I thought that was great. It doesn't even just have to be custom stuff you get attached to. This right here is 6 and this is 6 again. I love 6. I've talked about 6 way too much. I must be incredibly annoying to continuously hear me talk about 6, but I love 6 and I love my 6 deck. These are all cards from my 6 deck, of course. It's the journey of it all that really has meaning to me. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I think that's something that's fantastic about Magic, that it does give us these small little trinkets that we can share with friends, that it does give us just an easy access point of, hey, here's something that I think you'll like. Let me give it to you. That's great. This, of course, doesn't have to apply to you. If you don't care about the physical object of the Magic card, then that's totally fine, right? You don't have to enjoy every aspect of the game, just like I don't enjoy every aspect of the game. But I do want to make clear that I really think both sides are valid. Now, I want to share with you a little part of my own personal journey, and that relates to these kinds of proxies here. these very high quality printed proxies that you can purchase. When I started out in that environment full of mana crypts and demonic tutors, I felt like shit, honestly. It didn't feel great to be surrounded by that, and I wanted to kind of join in on that experience. I wanted to feel like I have a valid experience here too. And the path that I found was, again, these printed purchased proxies. Now you can get these kinds of cards for around 30 cents a piece. It depends a bit where you purchase them. The cheapest that I have found is between 25 and 30 cents a piece. I usually say 30 because that's a bit more realistic with shipping. Now the prices do vary. I have seen them go up to €2 a card, which is extremely expensive and way more than you should ever pay for a proxy. The advantage of these is, of course, that they look really high quality, they feel really high quality. They are really in all aspects somewhat equivalent to a real Magic cards. I mean, you can hardly tell the difference, right? However, the print is worse. It just objectively is. Magic's prints are very high quality, despite there sometimes being issues, but most of the time they're very good. And of course, ideally the backside or somewhere else says that it's a proxy. Now, there are stores that will sell you cards like this that don't indicate they are a proxy. And in that scenario, you're dealing with a counterfeit. And counterfeits is not something that I endorse or that anybody should endorse. The problem with counterfeits isn't that we are harming visits. The problem is that we are harming the community. Because in the moment you have a counterfeit, you run the risk of accidentally trading it. And if you accidentally trade it, you might have scammed somebody. And we don't want that. And that's just assuming that happens unintentionally. If you have a counterfeit, people might be actively, intentionally scamming each other. And that's just a really bad thing to have going on in the community. We do not want that. So anyways, these right here felt like a really good way for me to kind of get my collection going without spending the kind of money that would actually take. You know, like buying heuristic studies, of course, very expensive. Didn't want to spend that much money. Well, this one is only 30 cents. So I went and I bought a whole bunch of these cards. Like I have a whole bunch of them. This box used to be full. I've actually been gifting these to people who want them. I don't want them anymore. I used to have a lot more of these. These days I have a much fewer of them. I would guess that in total, I have probably spent like 300, maybe €350 on this. And I believe that was wasted money. As I was on my Magic journey, something has happened to me that happened to every single person that I know that plays Magic the Gathering, which is that my tastes change. And that's just because, you know, I as a person change, you as a person change. Everybody eventually kind of changes a little bit constantly. We are always evolving. This is just how humans are. And as we evolve, as we change, we slowly develop new affinities. There are new cards that we enjoy, new playstyles we enjoy, especially as you're becoming better at the game. I've seen a lot of people kind of opt out of like the generic good stuff pieces because they're just not quite as interesting, or they go full ass into them and they play only that. But you know, that's kind of like a different journey there. The point being that as you are going through your Magic the Gathering journey, you are going to have moments where you will want to adjust your decks, and oftentimes quite significantly. You might have built a deck that you don't like at all anymore. I've actually had that recently where I took apart a bunch of my really old decks. It hurt a little bit, but I still did it because I just didn't like the way they were built anymore. They were too simple for my current tastes, and I wanted to do something else with the cards. But this is where we run into a problem with stuff like this. These cards right here, these proxies, even though, you know, they are valuable cards in there, they don't actually have any real value. People will not pay you $6 for this Toxic Deluge. They will not pay you $30 for this Rhystic Study. And so if you reach a point in your journey where you're like, I actually don't really want to play with this card anymore. I want to play with something else. Well, you're kind of out of luck, right? If this was a real Rhystic Study, what I would be able to do is I would be able to sell it or trade it. And then I can get new cards that I enjoy. There's a certain value to the cards that I have that I'm able to repurpose into new cards. Now, I want to make clear here that I'm not a finance bro. I'm not telling you that Magic is a good financial investment. But we also don't need to be delusional here. I think it is fair and honest to say that if you spend $20 on a Magic the Gathering card, there's a somewhat reasonable expectation that that card will hold some value. It is very rare for a €20 card to crash into nothing. With all of these proxies, I was not able to build the decks that I wanted to anymore. But I also couldn't go and trade them in for anything. So the only course of action I really had was to either buy new sets of proxies so I can build the decks that I want, or, well, just kind of slowly start buying actual Magic cards. And that's what I started doing. I set myself a €50 Magic budget every month. And that might seem like a lot to you. It might seem like very little to you. I think that depends a lot on your perspective. From my perspective, €50 a month is a really nice sweet spot. It's not enough that it's in any way harmful, but it's also not so tiny that I don't get to do anything with it. With those €50 a month, I started to slowly accumulate the cards I wanted. And then eventually, well, it turns out that I had a whole bunch of cards in my collection. Back in the day, when I built a new deck and I looked at the price of Moxfield, I'm like, oh, it's $200. Well, goddamn, where am I going to get $200 from? That felt really insurmountable. These days, when I build a new deck, I oftentimes look at it and I'm like, okay, well, it's $250, but I already own most of the cards in it, so the real cost to me is like 20 or 30, and that feels much more manageable. There have also been multiple points in my journey where I had expensive cards that I had acquired previously, and then I decided, you know what, I don't like them anymore. So I went and I sold them or traded them and got new cards that I liked. I was able to kind of circulate my ecosystem. Now, this is all, of course, very obvious, like, oh, duh, Baumi. You can trade for cards in a trading card game. Well, yeah, of course, but you can't trade the proxies. That's my point, right? This, to me, the proxy approach, was a very sprint approach, right? This was me sprinting to the line that I wanted to get at and then, be able to exist there. Until I realized, actually, this isn't a sprint. It's not even a marathon. We are not even running. We're just on a stroll through a park, taking it very slowly and casually and having a good time along the way. I don't want to be running. I don't want to be casting Ristic Studies. I want to be hanging out with my friends and complaining about the new Gandalf wizard deck. Now, with the €50 a month at the very beginning, I of course didn't actually have enough money to, buy all of the cards I wanted. So what I did is, of course, I did my home proxies, and these are totally fine. This is great. This is basically free. These also look like shit, and I totally get if that bothers you. It bothered me. So what I did instead, and this is really kind of the big takeaway here, is I did these kinds of proxies. So these are just from a copy shop. These are not fully printed cards like these. Rather, they are just regular paper prints from a copy shop and then put in a sleeve and in front of a random bulk card. You can get bulk cards for free. Just go to your LGS and ask the drafters if you can get rid of the excess cardboard, and they'll happily dump that shit on top of you. And I mean, look at these. These look great, right? And you can get an entire deck printed for like $3 at most. Like, honestly, you can probably get these for free. And if you're part of some sort of university, or oftentimes, your job has a printer somewhere that they will let you use, you can get stuff printed quite easily without much payment. And put them into a lineup. You can't even really tell the difference, right? Like, it's just, it looks fine. It's totally fine. The point I'm trying to make is that I think these kinds of proxies, these expensive printed proxies, are a waste of your money. You are better off spending that money to slowly accumulate cards and focusing on cheaper proxies. And if you are not interested in real cards at all, then this is especially a waste of your money. Then just definitely go for these. Because if you are not interested in real cards, then why are you buying expensive proxies? That doesn't make any sense to me. So copy shop proxies are really the way to go. I'm talking about all of this because I see these kinds of proxies be brought up online all the time. And every time I just think to myself, I wish somebody had told me to not spend money on this. In the moment, it felt like a very sensible thing to do. It felt like a way to get real cards that, feel real and look real. But ultimately, in the long run, I really wish I had just spent this money in a more sensible way and focused on cheap proxies instead. If you do ever feel inclined to buy these, please never spend more than 30 cents per card. And also, if you're somebody that is of the opinion that you don't really need any real Magic cards anyway, you can proxy everything entirely, then these are hypocritical in my opinion. In that case, obviously go for the copy shop or just the home print. On that note, if you're all ass in on proxies, it might not be the worst idea to invest in a really good printer. I hope you guys enjoyed the video so far. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Would definitely appreciate that. And don't forget to support me on Patreon. There's a link down in the description. On the Patreon, there's a lot of bonus content, and you can also get your decks reviewed if that's something you're interested in. Another thing I've noticed online recently are discussions of bracket 3 or bracket 2 tournaments. And I want to just quickly weigh in on this because it's something that it's a bit frustrating to me. So brackets are of course not intended as a rule set for how you play Magic. Rather, they are a communication tool. They are supposed to help you tell other people how you want the game to go, what expectations you have for the game, what your intent is with your deck. Now, I love tournaments. Tournaments are one of my favorite things in the world. I've mentioned this before, but even though I don't play any standard or modern, I do watch standard and modern tournaments like all the time. I really enjoy them. I do, of course, also just watch other esports, like I love Smash Brothers. I've been watching the International. Like the International is literally on right now as I'm recording this, and I want to get done so I can get back to watching it. I'm not usually into football, but when the World Cup was on, I watched some games which were weirdly, surprisingly violent. I did not know football was that violent. But anyways, I just like tournaments. Tournaments are really fun. And the reason why tournaments are really fun is because everybody goes into a tournament with the same intent. We are communicating to each other that we have one goal here. We want to try and win the tournament. We are setting an expectation for our behavior. Now, you might notice that that's the same thing as the brackets. That's right. Tournaments just communicate your intent and behavior, and so do brackets. That's the goal of them, to communicate intent and behavior. And as a result, when you say a bracket-free tournament, you are saying, I want two conflicting intents within the same environment. I want something chill and casual that is simultaneously competitive and cutthroat, which doesn't make sense. Now, I don't mean to say that I don't think Commander tournaments can exist. This is something that people always say, oh, Commander tournaments are inherently flawed. And I gotta be honest with you, I don't really think that's true. I think if you have something you enjoy, then there's nothing wrong with wanting to do a tournament with it. As I said, I just really like tournaments. That's why I run the budget Commander tournaments. That's a tournament. But the important thing there is that with budget Commander, we have very strict rules for deck building, right? There's not a lot of them, it's just the budget restriction, but that is a very specific cutoff rule. And I am harsh on it. If somebody shows up with a deck that is €50 and 1 cent, they're getting an email back that tells them, nah, you gotta cut a card. On the other hand, brackets are intentionally vague. They can't be too precise because, again, they're there for communicating intent. They're there to communicate experience. And how you experience things can vary a lot based on your local environment and on the players. There's more to the brackets than just the hard rules. If you have a deck that consistently overperforms in a bracket, well then maybe that's not the right bracket for it, even though it fits the criteria. I recently saw this video from these two dudes where they talked about how to cheat the bracket system, and I just don't even understand that. If you're trying to cheat the bracket system, who are you cheating? Just like random people at the game store? Is that something that's worth doing? Do you feel good about winning then if you cheat the brackets? I don't know. That just doesn't make any sense to me. The problem here is really that there are people that view the brackets as rules for deck building, but they're really not. If they were rules for deck building, they would be awfully incomplete. Most of our budget tournament decks would be fine within bracket 3 according to the rules, but like, let's be honest, that's not the intent here. So can Commander tournaments exist? Absolutely. I think you just need to set very specific, clear expectations that actually make sense for a tournament environment. I use budget as a restriction, but that doesn't have to be the only thing. You could just not have a restriction. At that point, you're playing CEDH, but well, I mean, there's some things wrong with CEDH. I was about to say there's nothing wrong with CEDH, but I think we all know that isn't true. But still, you know, CEDH can be fun. I enjoy it. I play it very regularly. At the same time, you could go into a completely different direction. You could say precons only. And that's the restriction. So you have to figure out what's the best precon. It's the coin flip precon, by the way, in case you're wondering. I did quite a lot of testing for this, specifically for pre-con only tournament. Although unfortunately I couldn't participate because there was a protest that day that blocked the streets, so I couldn't go. Anyways, completely different story. Another criteria you could use is set restrictions. You could say only cards from the year 2025 are allowed, or only cards from the Ursa Saga block. Something like that. If you want to host Commander tournaments, you can do that. That's totally fine. If you want to host them with a deck building restriction, that's totally fine as well. But you can't use the brackets as a deck building restriction because that's just not what they are. They are a communication tool for intent, just like tournaments. So if you have both those things running at the same time, you will inevitably 100% of the time cause conflicts. Now I understand the appeal of saying a bracket 3 or bracket 2 tournament because you could have people just use decks they already own, so it's easier for them to participate. But in that situation, what I would suggest is saying you have to be able to prove that this deck existed in this form before the announcement date of the tournament. So for example, a Mox field list that hasn't been modified since then. As soon as you're modifying with the intent to win a tournament, are we not bracket 5 inherently? Isn't that kind of the idea of bracket 5? Ultimately, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys already know that's not how the brackets are supposed to work. But it's just something that's been frustrating me a little bit. People get very stuck on the hard rules of the brackets. And this is why I personally was actually against having such, like specific statements within the brackets. Because if you give specific hard rules, well, that's what people are gonna focus on because that's easy to understand. Since we're on the topic of brackets, maybe I can offer my own very brief explanation of what my expectation for the different brackets are. I don't know, seems like something that might be relevant and could help smooth these kinds of discussions in the future. Look at this very arbitrary graph. Yes, I did not label the y-axis, sue me. On the x-axis, we just got turns, vaguely turns, just like time progressing in the game. And the y-axis is just the escalation of the game. And when I say escalation, what I really mean is how the game changes from one turn to the next. This is, of course, a vague concept that is ultimately very interpretive, but just bear with me. For bracket 2, what I generally expect is a level of escalation that is fairly smooth. Like yes, it goes up slowly over time and it gets a little bit faster as we go through the match, but ultimately we're still expecting an incremental, fairly straight line that doesn't suddenly explode out of nowhere. Bracket 3 starts out mostly the same, but then as we go through the game, on turns 5, 6, 7, usually somebody just explodes and becomes immensely more powerful than they were before. And this is fairly common. This is what most decks try to do there. They need to have that like explosive aspect where the board or the position they were in at the start of the turn and the position they're in at the end of the turn are just so drastically different that it feels almost unrecognizable. Bracket 4 then is just kind of immediate escalation, right? We are trying to escalate as quickly as we can, as rapidly as we can to just end the game on the spot. I always like having very specific examples, so let's talk about mana cards as a, example. I think a bracket 2 mana card is Rampant Growth. It doesn't really escalate, it's just a little bit more resources for the rest of the game. Whereas a bracket 3 mana card is Mana Geysir. When you cast Mana Geysir, you just usually have so much mana, you can do so many things that even if you don't win on the spot, the way your turn ends will just be you will have done so much that it's completely different from how you started your turn. And then finally on bracket 4, there's something like Lotus Petal, where Lotus Petal just doesn't even require resources, doesn't have any sort of turn limit. It just comes in, gives you mana immediately, and you use that to immediately escalate and try to win the game. One last thing before I go. I recently had my birthday on the 31st of July, and I invited my friends over to come play some Magic. Now, every year for my birthday, I force my friends to participate in a deck building challenge with me. Last year, we did 80 card decks and 30 life. This year, I asked them all to come up with a custom commander and then build a deck for that custom commander. Now, I don't want to show you all of theirs. Like, there were some fantastic, cool things in there. My friends are like weirdly crazy creative. There was also, like a Broken Eminence commander. So, like, it's okay. I think that was all very fun and I really enjoyed it. But I mostly just want to show you the one I cooked up because, well, I liked it. I thought it was cute and I just wanted to show it off a little bit. Feel free to judge me, by the way. I'm very curious to hear what you think of this. Anyways, this is Cordy, Curious Contagion. This is a 3-mana Sultai 1/4 with Menace. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a map token. And exile a land, instant, or sorcery card from your hand or graveyard. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I drew the art myself, although I used an existing Magic card as baseline, but then I, kind of like painted over it and whatnot. And it's supposed to be an Innistrad Treefolk that wandered through an Omen path and then ended up in Ixalan and then was immediately eaten by a bunch of fungus. And it's actually the fungus that control him. Arguably, you could have made this like a fungus Treefolk zombie because poor Treefolk is dead. But I don't know, I just kind of like making the fungus Treefolk. Anyhow, the idea of this is that I like map tokens. I think Explore is a very fun mechanic, and I also like the Professional Facebreaker effect. Now, I understand that map tokens may seem a little bit out of place here, because, why would a fungus make maps? But I went and I also painted a custom map token for it that hopefully makes this all make more sense, where the idea is that the map is the fungus network that is left behind by Cordy, because again, Cordy is actually the fungus, the Treefolk is just the host. Then I wanted a card that has some explosive potential and resources that it uses, but also, very importantly, that consumes those resources. That's why Cordy exiles things. So playing with Cordy, I was able to have these like really strong turns where I was able to like push a lot of damage or win a fight out of nowhere. But at the same time, I could also only do that a limited number of times, even if I self-milled myself, because, well, +1/+1 is just not that much. And exiling cards gets rid of them. They're just gone. And from that point on, I am limited in the usage of these things. This is further limited by the fact that we need to exile a land, instant, or sorcery. We can't exile anything, we can't exile creatures most notably, and we need creatures to be able to buff them. I was really happy with how Cordy played, although I do have to admit that when the graveyard was full, Cordy could feel somewhat oppressive, just because, like, oh man, am I gonna get hit for 15 out of nowhere now? Or can I ever attack you? Because you will just make your stinky 1/1 blockers into 6/6s and then I'm gonna lose that combat. So that could feel a little bit dangerous. People were also like hesitant to force me to use my resources. So in retrospect, I would probably try to find phrasing that makes it so that Cordy can't activate his ability quite as often, but it's probably a bit more powerful then. Like maybe you need to exile one of each and then a creature gets +4/+4, something along those lines. Just make it a bit more restricted and make it less incremental, because the fact that it was so completely perfectly usable at all times made it feel like quite strong. Admittedly, not so strong that it felt overwhelming, although worth keeping in mind there, I was playing it against other broken custom commanders. This was certainly one of the fairest ones at the table. Most other people were only figuring out how their commander really worked as they played them for the first time, so yeah. Anyways, I just wanted to show this off because I like it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I have no idea how long this is going to be. Toski's gonna have to figure that one out in the edit. I'm currently at 53 minutes recording. Oops, that ended up being a bit long. Also a bit rambly. I don't know. I like making these kinds of videos where I can just kind of talk about a variety of different subject matters that feel like they don't necessarily warrant their own individual video. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Don't forget to support me on Patreon. There you can get more stuff like this. And yeah, anyways, I'll see you guys. Goodbye.